one, go.
Go. Hey, Kurt.
Hey, Zach.
How's it going, buddy?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
It's good to see you too, and thank you for being on. You were one of the people that when I kind of dreamt this whole thing up, I wanted to talk to my friend Kurt.
Yeah, you're just saying that.
I'm not. I'm not. I swear.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, it's the truth, and it's exactly why I wanted to do this podcast in the first place. Because, like you and I were saying, we're guys that get a modicum of guitar press and things like that. But in my personal opinion, I always felt like you, out of anyone that I knew or anyone that plays aggressive music, loud music, whatever, should. I don't think there's enough attention due to what you've brought to the instrument. And that's my humble opinion, but I believe I'm right.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I don't really
Absolutely.
think of myself as that, but it's nice to hear.
Well, it's kind of in everything you do. I always thought it was so interesting that you, with Converge, and we'll just speak about that particular contribution right now. It is aggressive music. It is heavy music. No one sounds. A lot of people, like I was saying, try to sound like Converge. No one really does. But everything you've done in that band, as far as your own approach to the guitar, has been original, even down to the instrument choice. I know you used to use, I don't know if you still do, but Rickenbacker guitars, and no one would think of that in the heavy music context, but you did, and you did it to great effect, I thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, Fugazi. Guy used Rickenbacker, and he was cool, and that was aggressive music. Granted, it was not like as informed by metal as what I do, but so the Rick that I have, I haven't really played it live in a long time, but it's a 650A. It's just a solid body maple guitar with humbuckers, neck through. So it's kind of an outlier for Rickenbacker in terms of how it feels and sounds. And I really like how it fit me. It has a 1 3/4 wide neck at the nut, which is really great for me with my giant hands. Like I always have, I have to play with really super low action because I have such big fingers. So if I don't have low action, then like I'm always accidentally muting adjacent strings to whatever I'm playing, and then that extra width on the fretboard is really helpful to me.
Right. We have the exact opposite hands. I have very small hands. I also play with really low action because I don't like the guitar to fight me, but I need thinner necks. I just, it's kind of the same.
Yeah. Would you like inch and 5/8 or something?
Yes, I like, well, oddly enough, I have one SG that I love. That's a Norland Aero 76 that has actually been shaved down. So I'm talking like, as
you're talking that okay.
Yeah.
I never know which one to call it. Like
me too.
Thickness, I think is like finger to thumb, and then width is like how wide the nut is.
I think you're exactly right. So for me, we'll say the nut. Yeah, that could be smaller, but I also like it where what I call go fast necks, like the Ibanez necks of the 80s, where they were like shredder go fast.
It comes down to like volume. So for me, like when I go for a thinner nut, I want a thicker shaft.
I can see that.
Well, never mind.
Of course, we both went there.
Yeah. I mean, we're all like 14-year-old boys inside. Of course, I think
that's why we do what we do. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah. So. For me, it's more of like the overall volume of wood in my hand. So when the nut is thinner, I want the shaft thicker, and vice versa.
Gotcha.
I think the same is true for like drum sounds. Actually, I've noticed when I'm like engineering records, and like if a snare drum gets smaller in diameter, I want it to go deeper, and if it gets bigger in diameter, I want it to go shallower to kind of preserve a similar volume with inside the drum.
Well, that makes sense. And for me, I think, generally speaking, I like thinner necks, but there's also the ones that you're right, thinner at the nut. If it's a little, like maybe a hard C or even a boat neck, what they used to call the Telecaster boat necks, which go hard V. If it's a little thicker, I can deal with that a little bit better if it's thinner at the nut there.
And that stuff totally affects your playing style too. Like sometimes I pick up guitars that feel totally different for me, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I would just play music completely differently on this thing, like a Strandberg or something, like with the squared off profile. Like you'd hold the guitar differently, like you put the strap higher or lower or whatever. Like it changes how you approach the instrument.
I couldn't agree more.
And I know it's kind of just like skateboarding, you know, like you see, or BMX or something, you know, it's just like taking whatever is in front of you, whatever is in your environment, and using it, you know, figuring out how to use it to suit whatever you're trying to accomplish. And,
Right.
Like, I think so much great music has been made not by people like tone questing endlessly for the ultimate piece of gear or a piece of gear that was used on a record they love, but more so just like using whatever that is in front of them and then developing a sound and a song based on whatever, you know, whatever they have available.
Right.
You know, I'm telling bands that kind of stuff in my studio all the time because people are always like, "Oh, we got to use this pedal because such and such a band used that pedal," and I'm like, I guarantee that band used that pedal because that's what they had and not because that's what they wanted.
It was in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, and then eventually that may contribute to some sort of legend of a tone, but that's not where it came from.
Well, and I think that's a true testament to you and what you've brought, you know, to this conversation is, you know, still to this day, even though you have so much success with what you do, and so many people seek your studio out, and you in general, you personally, it's still a DIY ethic that you bring to all of this. You know, like we were talking about your STL tone hub profiles. That it is, you know, I've been to your studio. It's the heads that you put in there that people wouldn't have thought to put in there. You know, it's the heads you personally have had in your collection for years. And I was just, it was so, to me, my friend Kurt, looking at this gear, I was like, oh, I remember that head at his studio, instead of, oh, I'm going to put 5150s and I'm going to do all this other shit. You know, it's like, it was actually your stuff. And it was a kind of a DIY, you know, amp pack. It was great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wanted to bring something to the table with that other people weren't bringing. You know, I think everybody's got like the 5150 and the JCM 800 and the diesel or whatever, and it's not hard to find good software versions of those amps, but like how many software versions of the Gibson Titan are there, and
right,
how many V4s are there? And you know, I should also say, like, the way that thing works is it's not a model of a particular amp, it's a snapshot of a particular tone. Right. So like in the case of like the Gibson Titan, it's like, it's that head, but it's also the pedal that I put into that head, the cab that it's going into, the mics that I chose, the mic preamps, the EQ compression and stuff that are on the mic signal, and how I dial that in for a specific sound. The tone hub thing is a snapshot of that. And now it gives you some additional controls like bass, treble, whatever, gain, and that sort of thing that you might have on an amp, but it's not a model of my signal path at all. That bass and treble are not the same bass and treble that are on the amp itself. So right. It gives you what I kind of love about that is like, it's not replacing the gear that I used. It's more replacing me than it is replacing the gear that I use, because you can't actually get the whole range of tones out of that particular piece of gear that I had using this pack. However, because it gives you like all these additional controls to modify my snapshot of that tone, you can get sounds that you never would have been able to get in the analog world. And I think that's really exciting. You know, actually Mitch from Napalm, actually, I guess he's not in the band right now, but you know, longstanding guitar player from Napalm, like he was telling me that, that, you know, he actually preferred his Kemper models of his amps than to the amps themselves, because Kemper also does something similar where it gives you that additional range of control to modify one of their profiles. I think that stuff's cool. You know, I'm an old guy, but I'm actively trying not to be a Luddite, and I really love when technology can be used creatively.
Yeah. I mean, I think you are definitely actively engaging in not being a Luddite. I always learn things if you and I talk for 5 minutes, I take something away from that conversation. Yeah. I am really running towards being a Luddite. However,
well, I mean, it's not as, I mean, honestly, like plugging an SG into a Marshall is way easier and way more fun than like twiddling knobs in a computer all day long.
Sure.
So like you have to have the patience and the resilience to put in the upfront work in order to, like, especially if you're going for something unique, to like dial in the sound. Like, so like for example, the latest Converge record, Blood Moon 1, that's like our collaborative record that we did with Chelsea Wolfe, Ben Chisholm, and Steve Brodsky. Next month we're doing in June, we're doing some shows for that in Europe. And
oh, great.
That thing, it's all helixes, line 6 helixes for the guitar tones. And it was a huge amount of upfront work to do it, but like we're playing to a click track and we've got all our delays synced up with that. We could do all the channel switching with MIDI if we wanted to, but we don't actually have to do that. But like all the sounds sort of mimic the album sounds, all of the, but then all the mixing or a lot of the mixing is basically baked into the helixes. So the guitar levels, the guitar panning, all that stuff is baked in. So like Steve and I send stereo signals to our front of house engineer, and based on like which part of the song we're doing, all of our panning and level is baked into that. So like if I'm playing a solo, I'll be panning in the middle, and then Steve might be playing rhythm, but he'll be like pseudo double tracked in the sides while I'm soloing, and then vice versa for me. And then, you know, we're paying for companion parts, or sometimes he's playing like acoustic simulator while I'm doing something else. And it's like, it wouldn't be possible without using helixes or some other sort of modeling amp. And it would be a whole lot more work on the front of house engineer's part in order to get the songs to sound as full as they do on the album. So like that, but that's like a huge amount of upfront work. And I have like, so long as I have the time, I do have like I enjoy that challenge, and I have the patience to put into it, but like, it's also like, it's a lot of work. And I also love that, like, you know, the last show Converge played, which is like the sort of normal version of Converge, was like outside with a vocal PA on the street in Austin, and like, you know, the drums aren't mic'd, and like there's no pomp and circumstance at all. It's just like plug in and go. And I love that too. And I love the fact that like we get to do both of those things.
Well, I think that's and again, one of your greatest virtues, of many, but is patience. You're a record producer, so obviously you have a certain amount of patience that other musicians don't have, because you're able to make a living and be prolific at that, and quite sought after, I might add. And again, I think it goes. If you listen to Converge, if you listen to your guitar playing, if you listen to anything you've added, like I said, again, you've added to this conversation, it is patience. It is that it's in droves, and that's just so clearly abundant. You know, and it's funny with the modeling and the amp profiling. I am a Luddite, but the argument is becoming one-sided for me. When you're guys like you and I that do this for a living, and we fly out and we do things like that, and you sort of, and we were joking, but I remember backstage, I think it was in Europe at a festival, you had the idea of one road case with 2 Steinbergers and a line 6 pod. And that was all in one road case.
I don't think it was a pod, but yeah.
I think it was a pod, because this was years ago, and you were like,
I've never been a pod guy.
You never, okay. I think it was just for your fly rig. It was like, we were just going to do that.
No, I was hot on the Steinbergers for a minute. And I had one, and I made it through one song at soundcheck with it. Yeah. It was great for like warming up and stuff, and you could just throw it, like you could put it anywhere, which was awesome. But like, the thing that I didn't realize about those guitars is because they're so light, and because the body is so small, you put all this energy into like holding it in place so that you can play it. Yeah. Like where like a regular shape sized guitar like has a bit of weight and hangs, these things don't really hang. They're just, it kind of reminds me of like playing a guitar with no strap or something. You're always just chasing it around, and it ended up being actually harder to play.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Then easier. But yeah, I love the fly rig. Actually, I'll send you a picture of my new fly rig. Like for most stuff, I use the full-sized Helix floor unit, but I also got a Helix HX Stomp XL, which is a sort of a medium-sized version. And I've got so my old Helix, like my regular Helix road case, can now fit 2 quilter heads and the Stomp XL and all my cables in one case, which is great. Because then, like the reason to do this stuff is like it takes out all the unknowns, right? There's when you're touring, especially when you're playing festivals and like throw and go festivals in particular, where you don't get a sound check. Like it's such like an unknown thing every day.
Right.
Like you have no idea what mics they're going to have. You have no idea what heads they're going to have, what cabs, like the PA is different every day. Like everything's different every day. And if you have like 15 minutes from when the previous band ends, there's not really a lot of time to dial that in. So if you can go up there, have the power amps that you're using every day, the tones you're using every day, take the mics out of the equation,
Right.
Give the same sound to front of house every day, have the same sound, on stage every day, but still make it not like a burden to the places that you're playing for you to be able to do that.
Right.
Is really super beneficial. And the other thing too, the other thing about it is like I use a stereo rig in Converge because I'm the only guitar player. So my stuff is pseudo doubled, but even if it wasn't, like because it's a stereo rig, there's two amps or two amp models depending on what I'm doing.
Right.
And so there's a phase relationship between those two amps. So if you're using mics on the stage, then there's a phase relationship between the mic on one cab versus the mic on the other cab. Sure. And if you're playing outside, especially, like you're probably on a bouncy stage, so those mics are like doing this all the time, so the phase relationship between the two mics is constantly changing.
Right.
So if there's a way to, so the first thing that I started doing was using Palmer PDI-03 cabinet / microphone simulators. Those things are analog and they sound good. I had those like tucked into the back of my cabs, and that would go in line between my head and the cab, and then there's a XLR out. So at that point, when I started doing that, then like front of house is getting the same, pretty much the same signal every day. And, monitor world is getting the same signal every day, and it's phase stable. So my cabs can get bumped around, the mics, right. Mics can get bumped around, and the phase is not changing. So that becomes like a really stable thing. And then moving towards like the Helix just allowed me to have that, but also have like IRs just straight up sound better than analog speaker simulators. So it gave me a better tone. Sure. And it gave me more flexibility and more portability, and I love it. I'm never going back. I mean, I'll probably always record 98% of the guitars in my studio with real amps, but sure. But actually, I was just recording something this morning, and I was using real amps, but I have an old. So prior to sorry, I have a wandering mind. So
do I. Come on.
Like I keep thinking like, oh, there's a little backstory piece I got to tell first before I tell the piece I'm talking about.
That's why we've always gotten along.
Yeah. Okay. So prior to everybody using like, fractals and Kempers and all that stuff, bands would have, like the big touring bands would have isolation cabinets.
Right.
Or they would have cabinets off stage, like facing the other direction. I remember seeing Muse one time and noticing that they had like diesels on the ground behind the stage facing to the woods. Yeah. And then they had like a plexiglass screen around the drum set, because that singer has so much like compression and gain on his voice that like the vocals just wouldn't be audible if there was like blaring cymbals and blaring guitar amps on stage, and you want to hear right. In that band in particular, you really want to hear the vocals. So then, the other way to do that was isolation cab. So you had a 4x12 in an isolation cabinet that's mic'd up, and then there's just an XLR connector on the outside of it. And so you get a forklift or whatever and like roll that thing into the truck, and you mic it up once at the beginning of the tour, and then it's good to go for the whole rest of the tour. And you just, roll it out onto the stage or behind the stage whenever you're playing. And so I actually, there's a few bands in the Boston area that are sort of, the legendary, like, Boston hometown pride bands. And those bands are Aerosmith, Dropkick Murphys, The Cars, Jay Giles, and Godsmack. That's right. Godsmack. So I ended up acquiring the former isolation cabinet of Tony Diesel from Godsmack. Oh. And now I have that in the basement of my studio, which is awesome. I put a Marshall 412 in it, mic'd it up with like a Sennheiser 906, and it's just there ready to go at all times. So like I had to record something quick this morning, so I just like plugged the JMP into the wall, and now there's a cab already mic'd up, and I just had to plug in a mic preamp and get a level, and within 2 minutes I'm recording. Yeah. So that's just as fast as using like an amp sim. So I'll usually do that if I have some kind of like last minute emergency guitar thing that I need to record quickly. But I love amp sims too. And actually I use Helix on bass during recordings all the time. So I'm all in on Helix.
We're on those oh God, I was just talking about it earlier. The torpedoes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Totally. Yeah, we're on those now. And I love it. I love them.
Yeah, they're great. I have the what I'm looking at right now, the Torpedo Reload, which that one's not really a live tool because it doesn't have any IRs loaded into it. It's more of a studio tool, so it's a reactive load, and it sends a filtered out to into your DAW, and then you put the Wall of Sound DAW plug-in on it and record it that way. But there's like all these like hacks with it that are really cool. Like you don't have to use Wall of Sound. Like you can, like I'll like mic up an amp like regular, but then also put the Torpedo Reload in between the head and the cab, and I can use that to attenuate it if I need to, which I don't usually need to. It's got a built-in DI, so I'll take a DI off that, but then I'll also take the unfiltered line level version of the speaker output, record that at the same time.
Okay. And
so now I am printing both my mic'd signal and an unmic'd version of that. So if at mix time, if I'm like, that cab I mic'd didn't really work out, let me try some IRs, I can do that. Or if I say like, oh, actually that cab situation that I had sounds sick, let me save that for future use. I can create an IR from that cab just using what I've already recorded.
Oh, wow.
And then I can save that IR for future use with, anytime I plug in that head, I could just like not even plug in the cab part of it. And it's really super accurate.
We lucked out with our sound guy because he's really, he's like a speaker collector guy. So he's prides himself on having every Celestion speaker ever made. So he's shot every one of those, in every cabinet simulation and everything. So he's able to just go through this endless bank with what sounds best for my or Tim's playing out front and all that stuff. So
nice.
And it can change and whatnot. So, you said earlier you're using quilters, the little quilter heads. How are you liking those things?
Those things are awesome. So the way that I use those in Converge is just as power amps, but they are totally bulletproof. Like that show we played in Austin a couple weeks ago, it was like 105 degrees. We played it like 1 in the afternoon. So the sun is directly above us, beating down on these heads. And like, the heads get warm under ordinary circumstances just from use, but like with 105 degrees and then the sun on top of them, you couldn't touch the amps.
Wow.
After the set, we just had to let them sit for a while, and they didn't miss a beat. Like the things are indestructible. And they're, you can have a speaker not plugged in, you can have mismatched impedances, and it just, while they might not actually want you to do that, like the amps don't seem to care, and they just keep on ticking. Like they take a licking. Right. So I love them. I just use the powering up end, but the preamp section of it's great. And I generally bring like a distortion pedal and a tuner just in case like the Helix goes down. I'll plug into the front end of that. And I think they sound awesome.
You said Helix Stomp. Is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that more of like it's its situation, but it's in sort of a foot pedal out in front of you?
Yeah, they have a whole different bunch of versions of Helix.
Yeah.
The ones that I use Helix Native in my studio, which is a plugin, and then there's the Helix floor model, which is what I generally use in Converge, and definitely use in Converge Blood Moon. That's the largest one that has scribble strips for each button, so you know what each button's function is, and then there's like a built-in expression pedal. Then they've got a rack version of that, and they've got like a light version of that. But then they have a couple of products that are smaller versions of Helix that have less DSP.
Gotcha.
And one of them is called, I think it's called HX Effects, maybe. That one's not amp modeling. That's just like sort of takes the place of pedals.
Right.
It might have some amp mods in it, but I'm not sure. I've not used that one myself. But then there's HX Stomp and HX Stomp XL.
Okay.
And those are much smaller versions of Helix. So, you know, the HX Stomp just gives you like 3 buttons. So if you want to do a bunch of pedal switching on that, it just requires more like multiple taps to do things, which is not always great live. But like if you basically have the same tone throughout an entire song, it's great.
Gotcha.
Or just maybe one variation in tones throughout a song, it's great. So that one's really good for bass players, and that one can do stereo and mono. And then the HX Stomp XL is DSP wise the same as an HX Stomp. It just gives you like 4 extra buttons, I think.
Okay.
And that's enough for me in Converge. So I use both the well, so far I've only used the regular sort of flagship Helix floor model in Converge, but I've recently set myself up to be able to use the HX Stomp XL in Converge also.
Gotcha.
And tonally they're the same. Just the difference is the smaller ones have less DSP.
I still thought your original idea of 2 Steinbergers would have worked, but that's just me.
I mean, at a certain point, you're
I'm
like,
just joking.
Why not just have all backing tracks?
No shit.
Like,
I know,
you
right?
still got to do something.
You got to.
You know?
But I argued with all this for so long, and then even Brian Baker, who I have interviewed here now, he went to Kemper's, and he would give me so much shit about my gear always, and he was such the like if Michael Schenker didn't have it or whatever, or Angus Young, and now he's using Kemper too, so it's like, well,
he's been on Kemper for a while. Do you know the secret mod to his Jubilee heads?
No, I don't.
You know how he has Jubilees on stage as they're kind of like they're backups / fake amps. Sorry, Brian.
Yeah, it's
from
true.
revealing your secrets.
Yeah,
but no, he did a mod to them. He flipped the standby switches upside down.
Really?
So that it looks like the amp. So that it looks like the amp is on. Like if you zoomed in, it would look like the amp is on, but it's actually on standby.
That's so
him. I love it.
Now,
sorry, Brian. Sorry if you're mad at me.
Oh, he'll get over it if he is, but I'm sure he's not. That's so him to do something like that, and then give me shit about playing like JCM 900s or whatever.
Well, I mean, it's awful when you're like watching a music video and someone's playing a guitar that's not plugged in.
I agree.
Or someone's singing into the backside of a microphone or something like that. Right. You just you want it to be believable. And guys, even though that like somebody's not like actually recording the song on top of a mountain. Or or wherever they happen to be pictured, like at least give them a cable. I don't know. I always try to have like a cable plugged in, like going somewhere off camera, so you don't know.
It's the aesthetics of the whole thing, Real quick question. So you said if you do take a quilter and whatever, if you were to take a distortion pedal right now as a fly thing and just had a distortion pedal, a tuner, what distortion pedal is that going to be?
Boss OS2.
A Boss OS2? No shit.
Yeah, that's the sound of Merrimack Valley hardcore. Converge, Cave-In, Piebalds, we all use the OS2. And the only reason for that is because that's the only distortion pedal Jake owned. And I got I'm trying to remember the order of things. It might be from when I got my first trainer, or it might have been something prior to that, but like it needed a boost, and Jake was like, "Oh, I have this distortion pedal."
No fucking way.
And I was like, yeah, let me try it. And like I messed around with it, and like it sounded cool. It's a really like mid forward, super tight sound. So it's like it starves the bass a little bit, but it also starves the treble. So you get all this you get a bunch of overtones to it without it being too like clanky. You can make it clanky by turning the color mix more towards the distortion side than the overdrive side. But I generally have it like almost all the way towards overdrive, and then distortion down pretty low, volume turned all the way up, and just using that as a way to kind of give an older style tube amp some pre-emphasis.
And just the classic yellow Boss distortion pedal.
No, the OD one would be the classic one. The OS2 is is basically like an SD1 and a DS1 in parallel in the same box, but blended more towards the SD1. But it doesn't sound the same as either of those pedals. It's really its own thing. So yeah, I started doing that, and then like I'm like the oldest one of all the people in that scene. So the other people like Steve from Cave-In and stuff, like they were like, oh, Kurt has this OS2. I'm gonna get one of those.
Right.
And the Cave-In still use them religiously.
Hasn't that pedal been around since the 80s?
Probably, yeah. I mean, Converge started in '91, or the name Converge came along in '91. I mean, that yellow, so that was a late '80s pedal.
That yellow distortion pedal. Yeah, it might not be the first Boss distortion pedal, but I remember seeing that pedal around since the forever.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, Boss has several yellow distortion pedals, but it's not like the ubiquitous like.
Right.
It's more of like a mustardy kind of yellow.
So if you're going going up to like a clean amp and you had a Boss OS2, you can generally kind of get your thing. Yeah,
well, not like a fully clean amp. Like I probably wouldn't, like if there was like a JC 120, I don't know if I'd get it out of that.
Right.
But like, like a JMP or like a V4 or some kind of like, semi-clean, like a tube amp that gets raunchy but isn't designed for metal. Like this'll tighten it up enough so it goes chug and without being sloppy.
I think I've had like nightmares about your backline is just a Roland jazz chorus and you have no option. There's no distortion. There's nothing. There's no pedals for you. It's like, here you go, buddy. This is what you got. You're in Russia or some weird shit.
I mean, you must have had experiences like that. I mean, I remember one time we flew over to Europe and like, our bags got lost and we had to play on entirely borrowed gear for the first show. And like, I'm a big guy, and the guitar that I had to borrow, whoever it was, like was not a big person. So like, I'm basically playing like you could see my belt buckle underneath this guitar. I had to play it so high. And like, I generally play like 11s or 12s for strings, and there were like 8s on it. And it was like, oh, this is awful.
Yeah, this is terrible. You just got to grin and bear it. Wait, let's ask the other dorky question. What guitars are you playing right now? I know you actually, you're an insane person. You made guitars and they were really good guitars. Are you still playing?
They still are.
They're amazing. I didn't know if you were still making them. I knew it was something. Yeah. You're one of those people that you have a brain like I do, and you focus on things and you get really good at them, and then you do other things. I didn't know if you were still making those.
Yeah, well, I'm an engineer by trade.
Yeah.
I have a degree in aerospace engineering, and my father's a machinist, so I kind of grew up around people making stuff. He had a motorcycle shop when I was a kid, and he still builds sidecar motorcycles. So Jesus. Like I grew up around making stuff, so that's where my mind is at. And like I think a lot of successful people will give you the advice that is focus on one thing and do it really well. Like I'm terrible at that. I want to do a lot of things like kind of good, because I get bored like focusing on one thing for too long. So, and I also think of like making gear and making recordings and making songs, sort of different sides of the same coin. Anyway.
Oh, for sure.
So I love the whole thing. But yeah, guitar wise, like I had a slow summer at my studio, and my dad had a slow summer at his shop, probably like 2009-ish. And so I ended up making a bunch of guitars in his machine shop that summer, maybe about 30 guitars that I sold, either kept or sold to friends. And it wasn't anything, I'm not a luthier. It was slab bodies. So I was basically making bodies and pick guards, and in a few cases I made some bridges or some bridge components, and then would get Warmoth necks and then a bunch of parts and paint and paint them and assemble them per my customers' specs. And my customers were just friends; they weren't really available to the public. So I learned a lot from that process. And then like I decided I loved the process of designing guitars, but I wasn't really the best person to build them, and I didn't really enjoy sanding. but I enjoyed the design aspect of it. So I kept doing that, and I tried a few different contract manufacturing partners and over the years, and had, a couple false starts, people like taking on the work and then not following through, or taking on the work and then going out of business, or different things happen. So it wasn't until like I found a manufacturing partner in Keystone Music a couple years ago that I was able to really pursue the guitar thing again. So in the past couple of years I've been going, it's certainly not a full-time business for me, but I've been going pretty full on with building guitars. I've got another big batch coming in the middle of this summer. I'll be selling a bunch of them directly, but also a whole bunch will be going to Chicago Music Exchange. So they'll be available over there. And also still building pedals. That's also done a mix of me building myself and contract manufacturing. Plus I have a DIY PCB business. So for some of my designs, like they're build it yourself type of things. And I think it's hard to find great things about the pandemic, but I think one of the cool things about it was how so many people's leveled up their skills during that time, like when they were stuck at home and had more time in their hands on everybody got better at cooking, but like a lot of people picked up building guitar pedals. So it was really fun to be engaged with people, as they learn that skill.
Well, I was going to brag about that, but you always make me feel so inadequate because you do so many great things. You do so many things. You're doing so well.
All right. Enough of the ego stroking. All right.
It's the truth, though. It's the truth. I went to fucking Berkeley online, and for the pandemic, that's what I did. It was great, but you made guitars and pedals and fucking did all. It's not ego stroking, my friend. It's just pointing out the you actually did these things, which is more than a lot of people, that's for sure.
Well, I'll say if I had to give out advice, it would be like, if you're interested in something, just do it. Like I feel like so many people come up with myriad excuses for why they can't do something rather than just doing it. And like, I had no business designing guitar pedals when I was starting, but like I just started asking people who knew about it, and punishing them and learning about it. And I certainly have plenty more to learn, but I was passionate about it and I enjoyed it. And now it's a little part-time business for me, and a lot of people have built stuff I've designed and enjoyed it. So I think it's awesome.
Forgive my ignorance about not knowing that more. Last time you and I talked, I mean, we talked frequently, but I think you were just starting the guitar. You had made the guitars, but they weren't available. They were just available to your friends. You showed me pictures and things like that. It was sort of larval stages. And what's the brand name of your guitars?
GodCity Instruments.
GodCity Instruments. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. So connected to my studio, and or if we're doing plugs right now, GodCityInstruments.com. And
that's the guitars you play on stage.
Yeah, lately it's been a mix of my own guitars and guitars made by my friends at Wild Customs in France.
Gotcha.
They make some really awesome stuff. I've been using their Firewild model a lot lately. I'm also they're building a model called the Impala for me right now. Okay. And those are loaded with these SP Customs pickups that are these really high output dual blade pickups. And I really like those a lot. And I'll sort of pick gear based on what is in the set list of whatever we're playing. And the Firewild that I've been playing has 24 frets. And Converge has a few songs that need 24 frets. So if we're doing or might do those songs in the set list, I'll play that guitar. None of the GodCity Instruments guitars have 24 frets, at least not yet.
Right. Wow. Well, it's really crazy impressive. It is.
Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it makes me feel like a fucking really lazy asshole. That's my own hangups.
Well,
like,
I mean,
I play guitar.
I feel like a lazy asshole too. So like, take that self-loathing, harness it, and do something with it.
Well, you're right. I mean, and but then there's not enough hours, and then you get to the end of your day, it's like, what the fuck did I just do? You know what I mean? Like, anyway, you actually have children, right?
Yes, I'll say
Jesus.
having children has changed my patience. Like, I think I'm still generally a patient person, but like, it's kids are definitely trying on the patience, and it's made my time a lot more valuable. So
Right.
like, and I notice this a lot when recording bands, is that like, I don't have patience for someone who is not prepared to come into the studio as much as I used to. I enjoy recording people, and I feel like I can make a big difference on a recording. But I feel like if someone hasn't prepared, then it's a waste of my time, and I get frustrated more easily than I used to prior to having kids. So in those situations, I'm just like, I wish I was just mixing, because like, I don't have time to like spend 5 days on this bass part.
I think that's one thing I've never had, is patience with people's poor musicianship. Only because I've always, and I think everybody should, if this is what we're all doing, we should be showing up with a certain level of quality that doesn't belabor somebody else's time.
Yes, I mean, yes, but that being said, like, there's plenty of people that are terrible musicians who have made some really great art.
For
so
sure.
I try not to be snobby about it, but it is tedious.
There's
a difference between like someone who has awesome style or is an awesome songwriter, or is like conceptually a great musician and a great songwriter, even if they don't have the dexterity for it. But there's also people that just like are the drummer's friend that are in the band, and that's cool too. That's awesome too. But like, that's not how I want to spend my time.
Well, there's also the most frustrating, I think, is when somebody can do it and they just aren't taking it seriously, or they showed up unprepared, like you said, but they're good enough. And it's like, if you had just given this 10% more effort, you wouldn't be wasting my time right now, and we wouldn't be here. So, yeah.
What's interesting that I see a lot is there's like, sometimes I think good musicians get confused with well-rehearsed mediocre musicians.
Right.
I think that there's people who can,
that's a great way to put that,
as long as they're really well rehearsed, can come across as being a good player, but then you can tell that you see their limitations really quickly when you throw curveballs at them. So like, the bands that I enjoy recording the most, or the people that I enjoy recording the most, are the people who, when you say like, hey, can you try out this idea, that they can go out there and play it in a few takes to be able to try the idea. It can be disheartening if you have like an idea that you think will make the song better, and the person just doesn't have the ability to execute it, or sort of
they can't
sabotages it because because it's hard for them to unlearn and relearn.
Right. I've also found that I almost admire it more when somebody has, let's say, 4 or 5 things in their wheelhouse, in their bag of tricks, and they've made that their style, and they know their boundaries. I think a good musician is somebody that really plays within their own boundaries and has made that their style. They know what they're good at, and they know their limits and that kind of makes their own specific phrasing. There's certain people, especially in punk rock, like you and I do, or heavy aggressive music, that they do their thing. No one really sounds like them, and they stay in that wheelhouse, and they stay. And that's interesting as well.
That's awesome. I love that, especially as a fan.
Sure.
There's always this push-pull between musicians and an audience. Like an audience wants a musician to be the thing that they know them for and to never change, usually. And I think musicians a lot of times want to be more than that. They want to do something different. They're bored of being the thing that people love them for, and they want to be something else. Also, whether it's like the drummer wishes they were a singer, or whether it's like, the metal guy wishes he was the indie guy, or anything. I started a band last week. I'm playing bass. Like,
really?
Does anybody want to hear me play bass? I don't know, but I don't really. I don't really give a shit because I'm having a lot of fun with it.
That's great. That's great. Do you have a name yet?
No, not yet. We still need a singer.
Okay.
This has actually been my problem every time I've attempted to start a new band. I start it instrumentally first and then get stuck trying to find a vocalist, and then the band fizzles and dies.
Dies in the grind. Right.
Yeah. Like the last time I did this, I ended up like writing lyrics and singing on the whole record, and then like, but it wasn't music, but I could sing and play guitar at the same time, and it just became, I don't know, it just sort of fizzled out because of the lack of personnel. So
right.
I'm endeavoring to not have that problem on this one. I want to get a singer involved before our next practice, but like it was awesome. Like we sounded like a band
That's great.
After writing a song, it felt like, oh, I'm in a band. Like this is great. We have another
new band. There's nothing like that too. There's nothing like that.
I love the fact that I practice in my studio too, and I can have like I wish like I had a document of like the first Converge practice.
Yeah,
that would be really fun to listen to, or painful.
You should name this. You should name this new band just your last name, like Van Halen.
Well, one of the band name ideas is one of our names, so it might be, but I don't want to call it Ballou. Do you remember Bonham? I was listening to Bonham the other day.
I do remember Bonham. It sounded like Led Zeppelin. It was great.
Yeah.
But I mean, hey,
it sounds like a hair metal Led Zeppelin.
It does. It fully does. But
it's awesome.
There's Dio. That was his last name. I mean,
but he was I guess he was like a known person when he started that.
You're a known person. Come on.
But I'm not like I have no interest in being an island in this band.
I know.
My songs always get better when collaboration is involved.
Well, it would be like suggesting that I make a band called Blair, and that wouldn't happen either. So,
Why not?
I mean, you're right. You're right, Kurt. I mean, you're right. Maybe I should start.
You know what I love? I love that that first Mammoth WVH video. Where he plays all the instruments, and it's just he's like every member of the band.
Yeah.
And he's also the engineer and like the runner and everything. I think it's great.
And I guess he apparently did play everything on the record.
Oh, I believe it. He's an amazing musician.
He really is. I mean, he started as a drummer, and his fucking uncle is Alex Van Halen. It's like, Jesus, goddamn Christ. It's like, well, fuck.
Wouldn't it be embarrassing though if where his family are so good, if he just like sucked?
Man, you know what? When we're off the air, I've got a story.
Okay.
Just remember, and we'll wrap this up because you and I could actually talk forever. I have two more questions for you, real quick.
Okay.
Since we're talking about guitars, do you have one that got away, like one that got stolen, or you had to pawn, or something you have lamented getting rid of?
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about this earlier because you asked me about the Rickenbackers earlier, and I told this story to somebody else just like 2 or 3 days ago. So the Rickenbacker 658 that I had, or that I have, I saw that at Mr. Music, which is, this was in the mid 90s, but Mr. Music's still around. It's the kind of the only good guitar store left in Boston. And went in, saw this guitar, was like, oh, that's for me. I need it. And it was like $800, and I didn't have the money. So like I needed a few days. I sold some stuff or whatever, got the money together, went back to the store. It was gone. Right. And I was bummed. So, and this is like, I think the internet existed. Like there was probably like emails, but like I guess there was probably AOL, but there wasn't really like a World Wide Web, and guitar stores weren't really on the internet yet. So what I did was I called up Rickenbacker, and I had them give me a list of basically every guitar store every Rickenbacker dealer in the country. And I just started going down the list, calling every single Rickenbacker dealer in the country until I found another one.
No shit.
And I eventually did. I think it was in Maryland. They had one. I can't remember the name of the store, but they agreed to ship it to me. So I bought it. They shipped it to me. I have the guitar, and I still have it. But then, fast forward a few years later, and this band comes through my studio. The singer / guitar player of this band has a Rickenbacker 650. And I'm like, hey man, where did you get that? He's like, oh, I got it in Mr. Music. And I was like, did you get it in like 96 or something. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, that's my fucking guitar.
That's the one I wanted.
Yeah. And it come to find out that dude, it was Elgin James. I don't know if you know him, but he's
really familiar.
Quite a figure in the Boston hardcore scene. He's also the writer of the TV show Mayans.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Did he sell you the guitar?
No. I had bought one just like it from this guitar store in Maryland. And I had been using that for years at that point. So yeah, so that was the guitar that got away, I guess.
Well, it's so satisfying knowing where it actually ended up as well, So
yeah.
Because that's I have a few, and not knowing where they are is also so heartbreaking. Losing it's one thing, but then not knowing, what happened to it.
Knock on wood, I've never had anything stolen.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, consider yourself lucky. Shit.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, and another question, so we'll wrap it up, but like, who are your, I should have asked this early on. Who are your influences? Who are the guys that made you want to start playing guitar? Like, who's your guys?
Like at the beginning?
Sure.
I mean, just, sort of all the classic ones, like, my point of entry to music was like I don't really come from a particularly musical household.
Right.
So it was just like what was available through like Columbia House tapes. So the the Hendrixes and the Van Halens and the Jimmy Pages and that sure. kind of stuff was definitely the first level. Once I found the next level after that was like Slayer, and I was like, listen to the way these motherfuckers solo, like, okay. Yeah. Like ridiculous. this is something this is interesting. And then the next big thing for me after Slayer, sort of simultaneously, would be Sonic Youth and Pixies.
That's a great way that's a great way. I think if I was to explain to somebody that never heard you, I would say, think Slayer, Sonic Youth, and the Pixies.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like if you take that plus also like, New York hardcore.
Yeah.
Because like some of my earliest show experiences were seeing like the New York hardcore bands of the early 90s. So like Mucky Pup, like Leeway, Biohazard.
That's crazy. You just said Mucky Pup. Joe and Rise Against and I are always referring to Mucky Pup, but also like,
Well, I knew about Billy and the Boingers.
Yeah.
But like Confusion, Life of Agony, Life of Agony when they had keyboards.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was like a very short time period, but it was amazing.
Crumbsuckers.
I never saw Crumbsuckers.
I love.
I think I may have seen Propane.
Okay, there's Propane, and then what about Ludachrist? Did you get what's a Ludachrist?
Never saw them.
Okay.
I saw. Murphy's Law. I saw a bunch. What else? Well, I missed out on a lot of shows because like every show, prior to streaming, like every show was a financial decision.
Oh, for sure.
It was like, can I buy a record or can I go to the show or can I buy a flanger? And like, I kind of always prioritized my own music above other people's. So like, I bought more gear than I bought t-shirts or bought records. Or also like when I got into a band, like, I would buy one record from the band and maybe I would tape the other records from friends if they had them, but like I'd be more likely to go buy a record from a different band than I would to get all the records from the band I like. So there's a lot of bands that I had like a weird point of entry to that and like my favorite Judas Priest record is Ram It Down because that's the one that I had. It's weird shit like that. Or a lot of it's like my point of entry was like Bargain Bin Records. So like,
sure,
like Drive Like Jehu's Yank Crime was on Interscope, and because that was like an unsuccessful record for a major label, that one ended up in the bargain bins.
Yeah.
So that I don't even remember the name of the previous one that was like was on Merge or something.
Yeah.
That record at Newberry Comics was like $14.99, but like Yank Crime was $7.99. So I bought Yank Crime, which that in that case it works out great.
And that record's so good.
But in other cases, like I end up with like a compilation tape, or like a bargain bin version of a band or something as my point of entry, just because everything was a financial decision.
I remember getting Black Sabbath's Mob Rules, the Dio
Mhm.
record that nobody liked, and I love it,
And it's
but
great.
same deal. It was like one of those nice price records,
Exactly.
Well, we
I
can
think
wrap.
I had what was that time? What was that? There's like, was it Seven Star?
Yeah,
The
seven.
one that's called Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi. I don't even know who the singer
Yes,
is.
no, I'll tell you.
Is it
I'll tell you who
Ian
the
Gillan?
singer is. No, I tell you the singer is. It's Dean Martin's son.
Oh, interesting.
His name is like, I don't remember his name, but it's something Martin. He's Dean Martin's son.
Wow.
Yeah.
Someone needs to do like some kind of documentary about like the children of famous people.
Yeah, I agree. That would be good.
Because like, I mean, there probably is something out there, but like, yeah, all the different bands that those people get involved in.
Well, a lot of them become
things that they do.
Become really shitty reality stars, and then
yes,
and
well, it's interesting. You think about like, who their parents are, and they probably aren't people that are both musicians. It's like, I guess the classic is like the musician marries the model, and ends up with a child who's like pretty attractive and pretty talented, but not like exceedingly attractive or exceedingly talented.
Enough for like yeah.
I think that stuff is really interesting to me.
Yeah, me too. Well, we could talk for hours, and you're a busy guy, as is above stated. So I'll let you get onto your thing. Really, I appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. Great talking with you.
Yeah, we nerded out for an hour, man.
We did.
And we didn't have a sound check, or we didn't. Yeah, no shit. We didn't have some press thing or whatever. Usually it's you and me backstage somewhere, and people are trying to get our attention to go do other things. So this was
people we know are walking by.
Yeah, hey dude, whatever. Yeah, it's like fucking high school.
I mean, I love that.
I do too. Well, hopefully I'll see you again real soon, buddy.
Yeah, on the circuit.
On the circuit, as they say.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you soon, bro.